I married the same day as my husband. In this life, he married his childhood sweetheart, while I wed my future glory. In my past life, after being betrothed to the Percival family, Lavinia threw a tantrum, insisting on going to her maternal grandfather's home at the frontier. But she was tragically assaulted and killed by bandits on the way. Since then, she became an untouchable, blood-red moon in Percival's heart. Now, watching him hastily try to break off our engagement in the grand hall, I could hardly contain my joy, silently thanking the heavens and the Bodhisattva for delivering me from my suffering. Percival carried a wound in his heart that could never be touched. Lavinia, his first love. On the day the two families officially became betrothed, Lavinia cried and insisted on going to the frontier to find her maternal grandfather. Her actions disturbed the peace of the Percival family, and they had no choice but to prepare a carriage and send an escort with her. This was because of the family's rules. Only one wife and one concubine were allowed, and she refused to be a concubine. When she left, Percival was discussing our marriage with me. Through the screen, I saw the elegant figure of the man, and my heart swelled with joy. At that time, I was still begging my mother to bring the wedding forward, eager to become his wife as soon as possible. My father, the Prime Minister, had shared hardships and joys with the Emperor, and my mother was a close friend of the Empress. I was born during one of the Empire's most difficult times. It's easy to imagine. My wedding banquet shook the capital. When the Emperor and Empress sent their blessings, both the Percival family and I were honored. But back then, I was young and hadn't seen the turbulent waters beneath the surface. After the Emperor and Empress returned to the palace, all the guests departed. Percival kicked open the door to the bridal chamber, forcefully pulled off my bridal veil, and dragged me into the ancestral hall. He said, "Lavinia's greatest wish was to marry me as my wife. Surely, Hethy fulfilled and Sesha. A lady should not hold a grudge against a dead person. Should she?" He pulled me in front of a memorial tablet, where the paint was still fresh, indicating it had just been made. "Beloved wife Lavinia. Family position of Lavinia." He called her his wife, making me a joke. I tried desperately to seal the news, and no one knew what happened that night. At that moment, I firmly believed I could never compete with a dead person. Later, it was proven I was right. I could not outshine a dead woman. What I didn't know was that, just the day before our wedding, he'd had personally buried his beloved. I forgave his disrespect toward me, adjusted my temper at home, and learned to be gentle and considerate to please Percival. But he always regarded me with disgust. There was one place in the Percival estate that was forbidden to me. I accidentally stumbled into it once. Inside, there were large rows of begonia trees, and when they bloomed, they were stunning. After we were married, every night Percival would return to this place to stay. Later, I learned it was the courtyard where Lavinia had once lived. The begonia trees had been planted by my husband himself. She and Percival had grown up together, childhood sweethearts. But the Percival family would never have a fallen woman's daughter as their rightful matriarch. When the family realized their growing affection for each other, they remembered the betrothal agreement made with my grandfather. And his betrothed was me, the legitimate daughter of the Marquis family, the only daughter. My status ensured that Lavinia would never become Percival's wife. But she became the untouchable moonlight in his heart, and a nightmare that I could never shake in this life. When I opened my eyes again, I had returned to the day after my engagement to Maddox. I was still bewildered as my personal maid gently tugged at my sleeve, whispering a reminder. He was dressed in blue, the very image of my past life's most cherished memory. "Grateful for the great favor of Lord Prime Minister. I am honored that you would entrust your precious daughter to me." Even his words when proposing were the same as before. I turned, about to step out from behind the screen, but the maid firmly held me back. Remembering the tragic events of my past life, I swore I would not repeat my mistakes. "I will cherish you from now on." Percival froze for a moment, his expression quickly changing, finally settling into a calm demeanor. "I have no intention of marrying a daughter from the Honora family. I am here to break off our engagement." The engagement that had been set yesterday was being broken today. This was unprecedented in the capital. His rapid reversal caught everyone off guard. The imposing aura around him made my father furrow his brows. Percival. Are you mocking me? My father slammed the cup down onto the table, glaring at Percival. And bowed. The matchmaker who had accompanied them had already shrunk away, stunned by the sudden turn of events. The maid, quick on her feet, had already sent for my mother to come. Percival. Say that again. My mother's face dark, and as she confronted Percival directly. I do not wish to marry a daughter of the Nora family. The details I will explain in person another day. With a bow, Percival ignored the identities of those present and turned to leave. His steps hurried. Father threw his teacup to the ground with a crash. Damn fool. Calming myself after the emotional storm, I tidied my clothes and stepped out. Seeing my enraged parents, my eyes slowly welled up with tears. How wonderful. They were still here by my side. At the moment Percival broke off our engagement, I knew. The Percival from my past life had returned. And now, his urgency was nothing but a desire to win back his first love. Very well. In this life, he and I have no ties. The matchmaker, unsure of what to do, wore a grim expression. Wanting to leave but too hesitant to do so. Leave. With my father's command. The matchmaker hurriedly took the bridal gifts and fled. But the dowry remained, wrapped with a bright red flower, its vibrant color almost mocking. Watching the people in the hall swiftly leave, I couldn't help but smirk beneath my veil, my red-rimmed eyes betraying the pain I felt, though I was secretly elated. Today truly was a good day. No sooner had Percival left than his parents arrived with gifts to apologize. Don't see them. I don't wish to. Grandmother immediately blocked their way. Bring the person in. After all, we serve the same emperor. It's better not to ruin the peace. Besides, it's always better to get along with others than to make more enemies. Get along? After humiliating my son like this, you still want me to make peace? As she spoke, Grandmother had already instructed the servants to invite Percival's parents into the hall. Percival's father smiled obsequiously. My son is at fault for his behavior. Please calm your anger, Lord and Nora. But the engagement was arranged by the late patriarch. To break it off so suddenly would damage Nora's reputation. Even if Nora never marries, can I not support her? Does she have to suffer like this at your family's hands? If that's the case, I will adopt her. And I'll see who dares to bully my daughter. No. There's no tradition of a woman staying in her family's house forever, Grandmother said sharply, stopping my father's words. Then, let out a low sigh. Turning to me, she spoke softly to comfort me, and Nora, Percival's family is just acting impulsively. You must persuade your father. Don't ruin this excellent match. I mocked inwardly, but feigned sorrow and replied, Grandmother. What do you mean? The engagement was proposed by their family, and it was their family who broke it off. Father is naturally angry. Given such a mess, there's no need to go through with this marriage. The engagement set yesterday, broken today, no one would say it was Percival's fault. All the blame would fall on me. Grandmother spoke eloquently, but every word subtly hinted that I should accept this silent defeat. A daughter's reputation is everything. Had I not been delayed by the Percival family for so many years, today, for the greater good, I would surely have submitted under Grandmother's persuasion. Tomorrow, we will return the betrothal gifts from both families, and will cut off any future ties. Father looked at Grandmother, knowing that the gifts had been stored under her care, then, met out. With a flick of his sleeve, he stormed out of the hall. The matter of the rejected betrothal gift spread like wildfire through the capital. Everyone was watching to see how this marriage would end. This time, before the families could even resume their talks, Percival had already made headlines. He rescued his first love on the round. Rumor had it they rode together on the same horse through the outskirts, and he carried her straight into his residence in his arms. That very night, the Percival family convened at the ancestral hall and sentenced him to 30 lashes. Madame Percival, furious, even declared she would sever ties and live separately. In the end, they forced him to choose either Lavinia or his family's hierarch, and Lavinia still became his concubine. See, no matter how much he loved someone, he still loved himself more. For to ease my sorrow, Mother took me south to my maternal grandfather's estate. When grandmother heard the full story, she took my hand with pity in her eyes. My poor grandchild. She sighed. How unfortunate you were to encounter such a family. It's better not to marry into them. She added, spare yourself a lifetime of suffering. Mother, resting lazily beside grandmother, smiled and said, Mother, I've heard there are many talented scholars here in the south. Do keep an eye out for one or two. Before the two could finish their heart-to-heart, my aunt entered, sighing heavily and lamenting the injustice I had suffered. Injustice? Compared to my past life, wasn't this already a far better beginning? After marrying into the Percival family, I discovered that all the family's savings had been squandered on the wedding itself. The house had no spare funds, no sources of income. Percival's father's monthly salary of 100 tiles could barely pay the servants. Madame Percival wept daily, claiming the wedding had drained the family's fortune. She repeated it so often that she began to believe her own words. Out of guilt, I offered part of my dowry to support household expenses and transferred the deeds of my dowry shops to the Percival family name. Madame Percival was fond of playing pai-gow. Though she had terrible luck, each round cost her hundreds of tiles, all to keep up appearances in society. Percival's father needed money to bribe his way through official circles. Yet he lacked ambition and lived only for his dreams of instant success. Percival's younger uncle was a notorious troublemaker. Every time he caused a scene, money had to smooth things over. The elders of the family still lived, requiring costly tonics and medicines each month. All the household expenses and purchases were freely charged under my name, the cloth bills, tailoring costs, everything. Percival's father was but a fifth-rank official, Percival himself only an eighth, yet the entire family lived as if they were of the second rank. The emperor now prized frugality, and someone with ill intent had already memorialized the Percival family's extravagance to the throne. Thinking of my husband's reputation, father sent word to warn me quietly. But when I relayed this to Percival, he scoffed. Who has nothing better to do than spy on another man's household? He said. If anyone has memorialized us, it must be because the emperor already dislikes my father or me. No one cared about the hardship I endured managing the household accounts or the anxiety of keeping my shops afloat. They spent my dowry as if it were their right, then turned around to blame me for their misfortunes. When Sister Yun was here, we lived the same way. They said, why must you cut back our expenses now? And Nora, Percival told me, I understand that you're new to managing household affairs and still prone to mistakes. But our daily expenses are hardly extravagant. You're simply too inexperienced to see it. And whenever I tried to reduce expenditures, it would bring up Lavinia again. Lavinia educated, accomplished, admired for her virtue. She used to give alms and host porridge feasts for the poor, to the entire Percival household. She was the pure white jasmine that bloomed in their hearts. While I, and Nora, was stingy, jealous, and cruel, the venomous wife who had driven her husband's childhood sweetheart to her death. A woman everyone avoided mentioning but secretly despised. Moved by my misfortune, grandmother and aunt gifted me several valuable collectibles. Mother told me to keep them in my private treasury, for my own use. Life in the South was peaceful and beautiful, it almost made me forget the troubles waiting in the capital. But some people are destined to be lifelong nemesis. Despite the disgrace he had caused, Percival still had the audacity to accept our family's invitation. 5 a month later. Though reluctant, I had to return to the capital with Mother. Grandmother hosted her annual spring banquet and invited all the noble families. Mother was feeling unwell and excused herself, asking me to assist grandmother in her place. When the banquet began, grandmother claimed she needed to change clothes and asked me to accompany her. But as we walked, the path grew quieter and more secluded, and suspicion began to stir in my heart. Sure enough, before we even reached the pavilion, I saw him, Percival, in a robe of pale blue. I turned to grandmother in confusion. What was the meaning of this? Before I could excuse myself, grandmother grabbed my hand and led me inside. Percival bowed politely, completely ignoring my expression, and smiled tenderly. Sister and Nora, it's been too long. How have you been? He didn't even mention the broken engagement. What face did he have to ask after my well-being? Grandmother, smiling awkwardly, pulled me closer to him. My maid, sensing danger, immediately stepped forward to shield me. Such insolence. Grandmother snapped. It's merely a lover's quarrel between betrothed. What business is it of yours? Step back. Percival seemed oblivious to the tension, still smiling gently. My words that day were spoken in haste. He said softly. I hope Sister Honora hasn't taken them to heart. To be engaged to you brings me nothing but joy. As the atmosphere between us seemed to thaw, Grandmother prepared to leave. But I caught her sleeve, making her stumble. That day, you said it yourself, you would never marry into the Honora family. I said coldly. If you wish to deny it now, my father will be happy to make an official visit to withdraw the engagement. I turned to leave with my maid, then paused, glancing at my grandmother's ashen face. After supper, father will come to retrieve the betrothal gifts. I added. Please have them ready. I returned to my room and told mother everything. Then it struck me, how could I have forgotten something so crucial? In my previous life, mother had suffered a miscarriage that led to fatal hemorrhage. And father, always so healthy, how had he suddenly died of a mere cold? Damn it. I'd nearly let the same tragedy happen again. 6. Mother. How have you been feeling lately? Have you seen a physician? I asked, already forming a plan. It's just my old ailment acting up again, she said lightly. No need to trouble the doctor. I waited for my maid to summon one anyway. Though I'd guessed the truth, hearing it confirmed still brought relief. When father returned that day, he also brought back the betrayals. All that remained was to set a date for the formal exchange of tokens, then the two families would be free of each other for good. And to add joy upon joy, mother was expecting another child. In my past life, I had seen the filth of the inner courtyard. I had learned their cruel tricks firsthand. Back then, after mother's death, grandmother had hastily arranged the funeral. By the time I recovered from grief and sought the truth, it was already too late. Later, when father fell ill, I had begged to return home to see him. But Percival forbade me, saying, a married woman belongs to her husband's house. He sent people to keep watch over me. I knelt before Lavinia's spirit tablet for 3 days and 3 nights before Percival finally relented, only for me to learn that father had died 2 days earlier. Life in the household is busy, Percival had said coldly. You mustn't dwell on grief and trouble your mother-in-law further. Then Madame Percival had added, and Nora, there's a new kind of gauze from the south called mist silk. I hear it makes beautiful dresses. All the ladies I play cards with have it, order some for me. Will you? And soon after, Madame, second young master injured a child while riding in the outskirts. The family has come demanding justice. Amid all that chaos, no one spared me a thought for my parents' passing. How laughable. How utterly tragic. On the night of my father's second death anniversary, I specially instructed the servants to deliver calming soup to each courtyard, then dismissed them. A torch was set alight in the begonia garden, and with the wind at its back, the fire quickly spread throughout the entire Percival family estate. When I opened my eyes again, I found myself back on the day the engagement was called off. The betrothal gifts were personally delivered by my father to the Percival family, who also returned the betrayal contract. The news of our broken engagement quickly spread, and given that the Percival family was in the wrong, things settled down for a long while. But none of this concerned me. What caught my attention recently was my suddenly diligent second uncle. Since the engagement was called off, my second uncle stopped listening to music, ceased drinking, and no longer courted beauties. Instead, he followed grandmother's instructions and began learning business management from the merchant she had arranged for him. I secretly informed my father, and he reassured me to not worry. Only when I woke up, like usual, did I learn that my second uncle had been forced to go on a long journey. While grandmother decided to focus solely on Buddhist practices and never leave the temple again. It was then that I realized. My father had already noticed everything and had it all under his control. Grandmother's insistence on having me marry into the Percival family was part of an earlier agreement with them. Once that was settled, my second uncle would become the head of the Honora family and support Percival's father politically. Grandmother, a concubine who had finally ousted her husband, had never imagined that the old man would hold out until he named a successor before passing away. All these years, seeing her son's uselessness had made her gradually lose hope, but when my second uncle suddenly showed ambition, as a mother, she certainly had to plan for her son's future. In my past life, they succeeded. After my second uncle took over the Nora family, he cut off ties with me, citing my jealousy towards him and my marriage as the reason. The once prosperous Nora family was ruined in just 3 months. And from then on, the family began its decline. My second uncle disappeared, and my situation in the Percival family grew increasingly difficult. Once everything settled, my marriage was brought up again. After much consideration, my father finally chose one man for me. Lancelot, my father's favorite student. When I first met him, he wore a faded garment, the cuffs worn and frayed. His looks were even more striking than Percival's. Yak, his name seemed familiar. As I was about to fall asleep, it suddenly came to me. Lancelot was a future key minister to the crown prince. Someone my father had once predicted would achieve great things. In my past life, after the crown prince ascended to the throne, Lancelot stood second only to him and became the prime minister. After the downfall of the Nora family, he had desperately shown his worth to the Percival family, using his knowledge to help them rise. He even tried to use my father's name to meet with him, but was refused. In the end, Percival was caught making an error in a public manner, and when he returned home, he took his frustration out on me. That was when I began to despise him. Later, I learned that Percival's mistake had been the embezzlement of 2,000 tiles meant for disaster relief. Fortunately, had he fulfilled the emperor hadn't found out yet, and after pawning all my dowry, I was able to scrape together only 800 tiles. What surprised me was that Lancelot had covered the remaining amount. It was only after I sent a letter of request in my name that he agreed to meet with me. When I entered Lancelot's house with my maid, I saw him looking at me with a complex, disappointed gaze. Without speaking to me, he handed a small box to the butler, who then ushered us out. Upon opening the box, I found my recently pawned dowry, my favorite jewelry, along with 1,000 tiles and banknotes pressed underneath. "Where did you go?" As soon as I returned to my room, I heard Percival's cold voice. Startling me, I instinctively dropped the box, causing the jewelry to scatter across the floor. Is it true that the esteemed mistress of the Percival family is out doing disgraceful things? He averted his gaze in disgust, as though a single glance at me dirtied him. Even when the Lavinia family fell, Lavinia never once entertained such thoughts. Percival subconsciously compared me to Lavinia. My mother insists I take a concubine to continue the family line. The woman has been chosen and will enter the house tomorrow. Arrange things accordingly. Without waiting for my objection, he dismissed me with a flick of his sleeve. He knew I wouldn't oppose it because the Percival family was my only refuge now. The next day, the concubine entered, and after serving tea, this matter was settled. I also witnessed the sordid methods of the inner household through this new concubine. After careful thought, I agreed to my father's request. The next day, Lancelot sent a matchmaker with betrothal gifts, and the two families exchanged contracts, setting the wedding date a month later. It felt like a predestined and karmic bond. On the day I was to marry, Percival took a concubine. There was no need for such a grand spectacle, but he didn't want to offend Lavinia. Our bridal palanquin met at a bend in the road, neither of us willing to yield. And Nora, a woman only marries once in her life. Why must we hold out like this? Percival spoke, his words clearly suggesting that I should step aside. But why should I? Percival, in terms of status, my wife's position is higher. In terms of legitimacy, my wife is the one who marries me as my lawful wife. Each time I said wife, veins visibly bulged on Percival's forehead. And Nora, I don't blame you for breaking off the engagement. Come with me today, and you will still be the main wife of the Percival family, with endless glory awaiting you. Everyone was stunned by his words, clearly surprised by such an unexpected turn. Percival, according to etiquette, we should yield to each other. A soft voice from the palanquin brought Percival back to his senses. He waved his hand, signaling for his men to retreat several steps, allowing us to pass. The crowd didn't understand what Percival was saying, but I did. Someone like him, who is all talk and no action, could never rise without my support behind him. Let's see without me backing him up. How much glory will he really have? It was perfect timing. For soon, a great gift was waiting for him. My palanquin passed by his, and I clearly saw Percival's hand raised, only to drop it back down with a darkened expression. The rest of the ceremony proceeded smoothly, wedding vows, and then to the bridal chamber. After marriage, we settled in the small courtyard that came with my dowry. He even joked, "Looks like I'll be depending on you to support me from now on." Percival, using his memories from the past life, managed to complete several tasks perfectly, and caught the eye of his superiors. Meanwhile, Lancelot, having been introduced to the crown prince by my father, earned the prince's favor and was greatly esteemed. The time had come for that matter to unfold. A plague suddenly broke out in Huajing, and even the palace physicians were helpless. The emperor raged in the court for several consecutive days. I warned my mother not to go out and, after preparing safety measures, returned to Lancelot's home. He had returned early today and was burning mugwort in every room to ward off the illness. No one has come up with a solution yet? Lancelot circled me with the mugwort before removing my cloak. No, he sighed. Don't worry. There might be a cure soon enough. The timing of these words was uncanny. For the very next day, having fulfilled my obsession, Percival publicly claimed in court that he knew a renowned physician. He swore to the emperor that he could bring the physician out of seclusion, assuring him that the problem would soon be solved. This earned him the emperor's praise and a promotion, and he became the talk of the town. Percival made no attempt to hide his actions. He brought Lavinia along and headed straight for the physician's residence. However, they were immediately caught off guard. Lavinia, unfamiliar with medicinal herbs, thought the flowers on the mountain were beautiful and picked a huge bunch to carry in her arms. "Who are you? Why are you destroying my medicinal field?" An old man suddenly appeared, causing Lavinia to scream in terror. "Master, we meant no harm. I'll buy these herbs from you at whatever price you set. Please, come out of seclusion to help the people." Percival remembered how, in his past life, I had paid 500 tiles to bring the physician out of hiding. This time, he brought 10,000 tiles, feeling confident of success. But to his surprise, the physician ignored them entirely, sending his disciples to escort them out of the mountain gate. Disappointed but undeterred, Percival believed his sincerity was lacking. He took Lavinia down the mountain to raise the necessary funds. Once they left, Lancelot and I emerged from behind the rocks. This physician. Who knows what his temperament is like, or how easy it is to deal with him? Lancelot mused. He silently made up his mind to protect me if we were thrown out. "Dear, I'll leave it to you," I said without moving, letting Lancelot approach the gate alone. After presenting gifts, he was, as expected, invited in with great respect. A quarter of an hour later, Lancelot returned, slightly dazed, escorted by the disciple. "My dear, it's not yet winter, but the chill is starting to set in. Why not wait for me in the carriage?" Lancelot took my hands gently, rubbing them together to warm them, his breath falling on them like a comforting breeze. He looked at me and suddenly smiled. "My dear, I've eaten soft rice again. Then carry me down the mountain as a counterbalance," I teased. Once the physician came down, the epidemic was swiftly contained. The emperor praised the crown prince for his efforts. And though Percival did not manage to bring the physician out himself, he did provide valuable information, causing the emperor to drop the matter. However, Percival's recent flaunting had begun to irk some people. They kept a close watch on him, just waiting for an opportunity to pull him down. Life wasn't easy for Percival these days. He was being ostracized in court, and things at home were chaotic as well. His young underling had been overly indulged, and this time he had forcibly taken the daughter of a respectable family. The girl had thrown herself into the river, and now her family was gathered outside the Percival estate, demanding justice. 500 taels were needed to quell the matter. Even with this money spent, the family barely had enough to pay the servants' monthly wages. Lavinia had to supplement the funds to maintain their livelihood. Under the Percival family's extravagant spending habits, Lavinia's dowry was quickly depleted. This time, without my hefty contributions, there was no advancement in his career. But Percival, ever persistent, began to consider the same path he had taken in his previous life. I ran into him again at a newly established garment shop in the city. He had brought Lavinia to tailor new clothes. When he saw me, he grinned smugly. I'm about to soar to great heights. About to become someone important. If you beg me, I'll even leave the position of head of the family open for you. Realizing the situation wasn't right, Lavinia immediately began urging Percival to pick out some fabric. As I watched, I pondered what could be so significant at this point to make him so sure of his rise. When Lancelot returned, I learned that the flood disaster had struck earlier than expected, and the Emperor had appointed Percival as the minister responsible for the relief effort. No wonder he was so pleased with himself in front of me. He truly thought everything he had done in his past life had been flawless. This time, I was eager to see how he would fail. Having been through similar events before, this time Percival not only completed the dam before the deadline set by the Emperor, but also managed to alleviate the floodwaters. He even ventured out in the rain to comfort the people. His reputation among the common folk was now at an all-time high. But the Emperor desired a minister who could solve his problems, not one who could outshine him and become a potential threat. When Percival returned to the capital, the Emperor promoted him to the 5th rank. Those who had previously avoided him now began sending gifts and congratulations. However, some who understood the political landscape waited and watched. Just as Percival basked in his success, an anonymous letter was delivered to the Ministry of Revenue, landing on the Emperor's desk that very day. At the same time, news arrived that the dam had collapsed, and the people, caught completely off guard, suffered devastating casualties. 2 villages were completely submerged. Furious, the Emperor ordered Percival and his family thrown into prison and instructed the Crown Prince to resolve the matter. Of course, Lancelot would follow the Crown Prince, and this would be the first time we had been apart for such a long period since our marriage. That night, he held me in his arms, reluctant to part. While Lancelot was away, I devoted myself to managing the shops that Mother had left me as part of her dowry. I brought fresh ideas, and soon the shop gained fame in the capital. One evening, while I was reviewing the accounts, a familiar servant from my father's household arrived, inviting me to the Ministry of Rights. If it weren't urgent, Father would never have asked for me so urgently. When I arrived, I saw Father sitting in the main hall, his face as dark as thunder. Percival has gone too far, he seethed. He embezzled 5 thous and taels meant for flood relief. And all the materials were fake. Father pounded the armrest in anger. Luckily, we didn't marry into his family, or we'd be dragged down with him. Father, what does the Emperor say? Once the Crown Prince returns, he'll be put to death. Father gave me a complicated look, one that confused me completely. Percival's been blabbering in prison, saying he's someone who's led to second life. The Emperor had him silenced, he's been poisoned and is now mute, and his hand that could still write has been broken. And Nora, stop holding on to any hopes for him. At that moment, I realized what was wrong. Father thought I still harbored feelings for Percival, after repeatedly assuring him otherwise. I was finally let go. I want to see him once, I said. Though Father disapproved, he agreed to arrange it. The night before the Crown Prince returned to the capital, I donned a black cloak and went to the prison. Madam, please. As instructed. There's only the criminal Percival here. When the guide left, I walked into Percival's cell. His body was gaunt, his arms twisted unnaturally. Our once glorious Percival, now reduced to this state, I murmured. Percival slowly turned his head, locking eyes with me. I knelt down, meeting his gaze. In a voice that only he could hear, I whispered in his ear. Percival, I wonder which is more painful, being burned alive or suffering a lifetime in prison. The moment I finished speaking, I saw his eyes widen. And then he began to thrash around in a frenzy. If you want me to save you, Sorry. You really think it's a coincidence that a letter accusing you appeared on the Emperor's desk just now? He glared at me with venom. His eyes filled with memories of my tragic past life. I lifted my foot and pressed it against his chest, grinding it down with force. Do you think that the reclusive divine doctor would care about the 500 tiles of silver that was exchanged for the century-old ganodarum in my dowry? Yet it didn't turn you a single word of gratitude. Or do you think no one knows about your embezzlement at 2,000 tiles? It was I who covered for you. As I spoke, I increased the pressure beneath my foot. But what did you do to me? You conspired with the Anora family to poison my father with slow-acting poison. I never even saw him one last time. You're nothing but a useless man. Your promotion to 3rd rank was only thanks to my behind-the-scenes efforts. And yet, you turned around and killed my father. It doesn't matter. Though. You died in the last life. And in this one, you'll be gone just as quickly. Tomorrow, the Crown Prince returns to the capital. I'll send you off at the execution ground. Farewell. Percival looked at me pleadingly. But when he turned to leave, he realized his cloak was caught beneath his arm. I kicked him away, refusing to look back as I turned and left. When I exited the prison, the snow was falling. For a moment, I felt as though I had awoken from a dream. Afraid that once the snow stopped, I would return to the cold, heartless Percival family. Wife. A shadow loomed over me, and someone shielded me from the falling snow. Didn't you say you'd return tomorrow? With the matters of the heart settled, even my smile seemed lighter. I couldn't wait to see my wife, so my steps were a little quicker. Lancelot took my hand and tucked it into his chest for warmth, pulling my cloak tighter around me. Wife. Didn't you say you'd return earlier? His words, so abruptly spoken, caused my smile to fade. His eyes were deep, as though nothing could escape his notice. I leaned against the bed, holding the warm hot water bottle Lancelot had given me, deep in thought about his intentions. Since you dislike the Percival family so much, why would you cover up their embezzlement? I casually probed, testing the waters. You are my mentor's only daughter. I must protect you. If the Percival family falls, you won't escape unscathed either. It was confirmed the Lancelot from my past life. So, why didn't you meet with me when I used my father's name? You are my mentor's only daughter. Yes. But using his name to do favors for that kind of man would be an insult to him. I changed positions, sitting up and looking at Lancelot seriously. There were moves behind the Anora family's downfall. Weren't there? Thank you. In this reborn life, the things I couldn't understand before were slowly becoming clear. One last question, when did you first develop feelings for me? I watched as Lancelot's ears slowly turned red, suddenly feeling rather amused. I placed my hands on either side of his face, lightly grasping his ear, forcing him to meet my gaze. It was the year I came of age. That moment has never left me. His eyes burned with passion, no longer shy as they had been earlier. This time, I took the initiative to propose. I didn't want any regrets. Lancelot took my wrist, drawing closer and kissing the inside of my wrist. His eyes were full of deep affection and a hidden, obsessive intensity. Fortunately, I chose him in this life. After the Crown Prince returned to the capital and settled matters, the day for the entire Percival family's execution was set. On that day, Percival knelt on the execution ground and locked eyes with me, his eyes full of regret. But it was too late. As winter's end approached, the Xiang family celebrated a joyous event. The child born in the last life had now safely arrived, and the family hosted a 3-day banquet. The following year, the emperor fell ill and passed the throne to the crown prince. Lancelot was promoted to 5th rank. The year after that, I gave birth to a daughter. Lancelot was promoted to 3rd rank and became in charge of 6 ministries. Lancelot, navigating the court with ease, always looked forward to the time when he could return home. Amidst the envy of others, he rushed to meet his wife and daughter. Wife. Wife. Good things always come in pairs. Knowing what he meant, I quickly shoved a piece of pastry into his mouth, temporarily distracting him. Every time he came home, he clung to me, even becoming jealous of how much time I spent with our daughter. Looks like it's time for me to open another shop in the capital. This time, I'll sell aged vinegar. After being reborn, I tried my best to avoid all interactions with Kevin. When he wanted to rest at home during holidays, I packed my bag and went to the countryside. When he decided to develop locally, I was determined to go out and make a living. In my past life, I spent my entire life as a housewife, becoming a yellow-faced woman who only took care of her husband and children. At the moment I took my last breath, even my son heaved a sigh of relief, glad that his father could finally live with Wendy. Holding the X-City Evening News bought from the newsstand, I almost burst into tears. No one knew that I had been reborn. The first thing I did after being reborn was find a job advertisement in the newspaper with a workplace thousands of miles away. I called and overturned all previous decisions. The recruiter on the other side was confused. Didn't you say before that your fiancé planned to stay locally, and you didn't want to be separated by two places? So you couldn't come this far? Why do you want to come here again? Speaking of my fiancé, Kevin's tall and straight figure emerged in my mind. Kevin was a high-achieving graduate from a prestigious university. Tall, good-looking, gentle and polite. A rare senior talent in the county. As for me, a technical school graduate, being able to climb to a marriage with him, others said it was a blessing cultivated over several lifetimes. The reason was that my father had saved his father's life when he was a soldier, so the two families made a baby batruffle. I held the phone and smiled, my voice a little relaxed. There have been changes in the marriage, and I can go again. The other side seemed worried. Will there be no more changes? No. No. When can I report to the company? You can come on the 21st. Hanging up the phone, I breathed a sigh of relief, looked at the red sunset in the sky, and slowly walked home. In my past life, I gave up this rare professional and suitable job opportunity in the newspaper. The reason was that Kevin planned to develop locally, and I didn't want to be separated after marriage. In a few more days, I would marry him. After marriage, because I didn't have a suitable job, I set up a stall selling small things like socks and underwear. However, Kevin still went to develop in a big coastal city in the south not long after marriage. I stayed at home to serve the elderly, and in the end, we were still separated by two places. As a high-achieving student, he was like a fish in water wherever he went and mixed very well. That's why Wendy and her orphaned mother and daughter always followed him. He lived a life of luxury with them in the big coastal city. But I always stayed in this small northern county, getting up early and working late to set up a stall to make money, burying my head and taking care of my in-laws and raising children. My child grew up slowly under my single-handed care. But after being picked up by Kevin to the south, he never wanted to return to my side. He called to inform me, "Mom, I think life here is much better than at home. I won't go back." I was worried. "Your father is busy. Is there anyone to take care of you there? Better go home. Mom can take care of you anyway. Dad has Wendy and Leela here. They are both people living in big cities. They can take care of me no problem." I opened my mouth and couldn't speak for a while. My son never came back. Forgot me, had he fostelblaed sigh. The mother who had worked hard to raise him, and turned to filial piety to the woman Wendy. Even I didn't know about his marriage. And I learned the news from my in-laws. They had long been paralyzed in bed. And it was only by my careful care day and night that they waited for the good news of their grandson. When my son called again, it was to persuade me to divorce his father. "Mom, divorce my dad. You've tied him up for so long. And it's time to return his freedom. Moreover, Wendy and my dad are clearly a suitable pair in all aspects. What's the matter with you always occupying my dad, whether in terms of education or appearance? You are not worthy of my dad. You are together because of the baby bubble set by the older generation. You are not on the same level at all. How can you have common language? So, I advise you to divorce him. It's good for both of you." I didn't agree. To be exact, I was unwilling. I got up early and worked late to set up a stall to make money to support the family. But Kevin sent his high salary to that mother and daughter to feed them sea cucumbers and abalones. When my son was sick in the middle of the night and I couldn't get a taxi, I carried him 6 kilometers to the county hospital. But Kevin drove Wendy to a concert and sent her daughter Leela to dance class. My in-laws were paralyzed due to a serious illness. And I stayed up all night serving them by the hospital bed. But Kevin was running around for that woman thousands of miles away. Years of hard work made me gray-haired early, with ravines on my sallow face. After my in-laws died, I went to the big metropolitan city in the south to find Kevin and my son, wanting to be reunited with them. They looked at me like a monster. "Why have you become like this?" Kevin frowned. "Mom, don't go out with my dad. You don't look like his wife, but like his mother. Wendy is more suitable." My son advised me. "What are you doing here? There is no place for you in this home. You'd better go back to your small county." My daughter-in-law Leela looked down on me and refused to call me mom. Wendy was proud. "Kevin has always liked me. Look at your appearance. You can't compare with me. I advise you to divorce Kevin as soon as possible. This is good for everyone." I was literally angry to death. My husband disliked that I dressed too simply. And my son accused me of dressing too brightly. I just didn't go out. And my son complained that I lost my temper for no reason. He didn't know that after his scolding, I was so angry that I couldn't catch my breath. My eyes went dark. And I fell to the ground with a plop. When he heard a loud noise in the room, he thought I had thrown things angrily, and left without looking back. Only I was lying alone on the ground, slowly dying. Before I died, I regretted incomparably why I had led such a life and why I had given birth to this unfilial son. Fortunately, I was reborn. Back to before marrying Kevin. When everything was still in time. When I got home, I first went to the TV cabinet in the living room to find the calendar and counted to the 21st. Which was exactly 11 days away. I used a red pen to draw a big triangle on the calendar for the 21st, staring at this date for a long time. My heart was full of emotions. In 11 more days, I could jump out of the shackles of my past life and go to a beautiful new life. Holding the thin stack of paper, I looked forward to it becoming thinner day by day. Looking forward to the day of freedom. After standing in front of the desk calendar for a while, I went to cook. I simply fried a dish, ate the leftover buns from noon, and drank some water. And I was full. Just after cleaning up the dining table, the doorbell rang. Kevin as usual entered the door laughing and talking with Wendy and her daughter. Wendy was Kevin's classmate. Her husband died early, and she lived with her daughter alone. She was tall and had beautiful eyebrows. Wearing a goose yellow dress, she looked like a model on the tea stage. Wendy looked at the empty dining table. "I'm sorry to disturb you, sister-in-law. What's for dinner tonight?" I pretended not to hear. Kevin frowned and looked at the cold pots and stoves in the kitchen. "No meal?" I wiped my hands. "No." I turned and walked out of the kitchen. When I was watching TV in the living room, I heard Wendy's faint voice. "Kevin, sister-in-law doesn't welcome us. Leela and I should go back." Kevin sent the person to the door and came back to question me. "What do you mean by this?" Seeing that I didn't speak, he explained. "After all, Wendy and her daughter are my old classmates. She helped me before. Now that they are orphans and widows and have turned to me for help, I can't stand by and ignore them. Can I? Leela loves your cooking, so she comes to our house for dinner. Don't be so petty." I had thought that I would say goodbye to these people soon and was too lazy to pay attention to them, but Kevin's words aroused my anger. "Why should I cook? I'm not your servant." My tone was a bit harsh. So Kevin didn't speak anymore. I planned to prepare more money for working in other places. So I got up early to wholesale some good-looking socks and underwear. Things sold quickly. When I was closing the stall, I looked up and saw Kevin taking Wendy and her daughter into a restaurant. Since they were not welcome when brought home, they found a good way to just eat outside. Needless to say, Kevin must have treated them. After putting away my things, I rode my bicycle home and cooked something for myself. After eating, I started to pack my things. Since I was leaving, I had better clean up all my things. Kevin was not at home, which was just right. After packing almost, I just stuffed all the things into the woven bag and pushed them under the bed when I heard Kevin come back. He walked outside my room and asked loudly, are you there? I didn't want to let him in and responded. What's the matter? Seeing that I didn't mean to let him in, he didn't push the door and stood outside the door. I want to seek your opinion. Is it okay to set the wedding banquet at Jiangwo Hotel at the end of the month? I pondered for a moment. Wait until I inspect it before deciding. First find an excuse to delay. I definitely won't get married. He paused and said okay, without speaking again. I breathed a sigh of relief. In fact, he could have said it directly, but he came to ask me, which surprised me a bit. But anyway, I want to say goodbye to him. Although he was once the person I liked and my everything, it was this person who gave me a lifetime of bad luck in my past life. I won't repeat the same mistakes. I must leave him. The farther, the better. The next day was the weekend. Kevin went out and bought fried dough sticks and soybean milk. When he saw me, he tilted his head. Come and eat together. Since I didn't cook for them that day, I have been cooking and eating by myself. I went over and sat down in silence. I'm resting at home this weekend. Let's go to the movies after eating. This had never happened since I moved into his house. I raised my eyes. No need. I'm going back to the countryside. Is there something? He put down his chopsticks. Go home and discuss the marriage with my parents. I lowered my head and took a sip of soybean milk. In fact, it was not a discussion, but to persuade them to cancel the engagement. I'll go back with you. The fried dough stick in my hand almost fell. No need. I refused coldly. He looked at me. When going out, I took the packed big woven bag and planned to take it home. After all, I was leaving, and the things here had to be taken away. I thought Kevin was sleeping in his room, but when I came out of the room, he was sitting on the sofa in the living room reading a newspaper. Looking up and seeing me struggling to carry the big woven bag, he walked towards me. Carrying so many things? I looked down and casually made up. It's rare to go home, so I always want to bring more for my parents. It's too heavy for you to carry. Let me help you. He reached out. I was wondering whether to ask him for help when there was a sudden urgent knock on the door. Uncle? Are you there? My mom is sick. It was Leela's clear voice. As soon as Kevin heard this, he immediately became anxious and hurried after Leela. I scoffed at the luggage in my hands. Walking up to the calendar, I tore off yesterday's page, pinching the pages between my fingers. I noticed the calendar had become thinner by one day from that day. Thinking about having to break off the engagement with Kevin when I got home, my heart felt heavy. This matter would surely disappoint others. I clenched my fingers tightly no matter what. I had to convince them. A light mist rose in the countryside at night, and the air was cool. My father squatted in the courtyard smoking, while my mother stood at the threshold with a furrowed brow. The moonlight cast a cold, bright patch on the empty ground in front of the door. Did that kid Kevin bully you? Or does he have someone else outside? Girl, tell your mother we'll go to his family and demand an explanation. The arranged marriage was their idea in the first place. We can't let him mistreat you. I bit my lip. I just don't like him and don't want to marry him. My mother froze and looked at my father. My father immediately snuffed up a cigarette with his hand, crushed it in his palm, and threw it to the ground. He stood up by pressing his knees. Let's go break off the engagement with Kevin's family. If our girl doesn't like that kid from the Kevin family, she must have her reasons. Even if he has good prospects, what's the point if he's not good to our girl? My mother nodded. That's right, we can't let our girl suffer. A warm feeling welled up in my heart as I silently followed behind. The visit to Kevin's family went smoothly. My parents simply said Kevin was a high-achieving student with unlimited future prospects, so we were unmatched and unsuitable. Kevin's parents repeatedly tried to persuade us, but my parents didn't relent. Finally, having fulfilled my sigh, Kevin's father let out a long sigh. Old comrade. I initially wanted our families to be closer. Who knew the kids would end up like this? All right. Since your daughter insists on breaking off the engagement, we'll call it off. Kevin's father took out the betrothal token from when the engagement was set, exchanged it with my father, and both sides signed the agreement to dissolve the engagement, keeping one copy each. Only then was the matter resolved. Supporting my parents on the way back, I felt much lighter. In their eyes, Kevin was an exceptional son-in-law. Hard to find even with a lantern. They couldn't understand why I insisted on breaking off the engagement. I couldn't tell them that in my past life, Kevin had tortured me for a lifetime. And I had never benefited from him at all. He might as well have been Wendy's husband. Even the son I raised with my own hands had wanted to be Wendy and Kevin's son. And I had been driven to death by them. Breaking off the engagement was easier than I expected. I told my parents about working in another province. And though they were worried, they supported me. Thinking that I would be far away after starting work and it would be hard to come back, I stayed at home for a few more days. It wasn't until the 17th that I returned to the county town. When I got back, I first went to the calendar and tore off 7 pages. Holding the remaining thin stack of 3 pages, my heart was filled with hope. Only 3 days left. In 3 days, I would be free. After being away for several days, the fridge was empty. I put down my bag and went out to buy groceries. Carrying a bag of groceries back, I found the door open. And before I even entered, I heard Leela shouting loudly, "Mom, look how pretty this is. Can I wear it around my neck?" Wendy smiled gently. "Of course. Uncle Kevin loves our Leela, and must you look beautiful with it on." I could faintly hear Kevin's soft laughter. Stepping inside, I saw my backpack thrown open on the side, its contents scattered haphazardly on the sofa. My family's ancestral jade pendant was now hanging around Leela's neck. Bang, I shut the door. Everyone in the room jumped and looked at me. I walked expressionlessly up to Leela and yanked the pendant from her neck. "Has some manners, don't you know you can't touch other people's things without permission?" Leela, probably seeing me angry for the first time, burst into tears with a wail. Wendy quickly came to comfort the child, looking aggrieved. "Sister-in-law, Leela is still young. It's all my fault. I thought it was okay for her to play with it. If you're upset, just yell at me." Kevin looked at me with displeasure, his tone accusatory. "Why get angry with the child? She doesn't know any better. Playing with the thing won't break it." He turned to join Wendy in comforting the child. "Leela, don't cry. Uncle Kevin will scold her later and make sure Auntie never yells at Leela again." Seeing Leela still crying, Kevin simply picked her up and went into the room. "Leela, be good. Stop crying. Uncle will give you something better. Look. Isn't this nicer than Auntie's pendant?" Wendy glanced at me triumphantly before following Kevin into the room. I put my things back into the bag one by one. When I reached my room door, I found my belongings piled up outside, and the room was locked. Kevin came out and saw me standing at the door, as if remembering something. "Oh right. Wendy's rental contract expired, and she couldn't find a place to stay immediately. Since you were in the countryside, she temporarily stayed in your room." Noticing my questioning look, he added, "Now that you're back, you can stay in my room, and I'll find somewhere else." I sneered. So eager to see someone else's home? This was a house allocated by his unit, so I didn't want to argue. It wasn't appropriate to share a room before marriage. And since he said he'd leave, I let it be after all. I was leaving in a few days. With that in mind, I followed him into the room. Wendy had calmed Leela down. Seeing me enter, she carried Leela to the next door. Kevin moved the items piled at the door into the room, packed his personal belongings into a plastic bag, and turned to ask me, "Have you discussed the wedding plans?" I shook my head. "My parents talked to your parents and checked our birth dates. The upcoming dates aren't suitable, so we'll set a new date next month." I had asked my parents to specifically communicate with Kevin's family about this, planning to delay telling Kevin for now. He didn't say much, but when he turned his head and saw the piled items, he asked curiously, "You have so few things in your room?" He didn't know I had already packed and taken most things back home. I glanced at them. I don't like the mess of too many things. Before he could say more, Wendy poked her head in. Kevin. My phone won't open app suddenly. Can you take a look?" After Kevin left with Wendy, I took a nap. When I got up to wash my face, I found my toiletries on the sink had disappeared, replaced by high-end skincare products. After searching, I found my usual Dabao moisturizer thrown on the shelf behind the toilet. "Sister-in-law. Excuse me. I need to wash my hands. I was pushed to the side, my shoulder hitting the wall. Wendy bent down to wash her hands, not caring that water splashed on me. I stared at her and said coldly, "Who allowed you to touch my things?" She glanced at what was in my hand, her eyes full of disdain. "Oh, sister-in-law. Just throw away such cheap face cream, it'll ruin your skin." "I'm doing this for your own good," I scoffed. No wonder Leela has no manners. Wendy froze, clearly not expecting me to retort. "What do you mean?" I ignored her. Returning to the room, I packed all my things into my bag. Carrying the bag out, Kevin called me from the dining table. "I was just about to get you come eat." I shook my head. "You eat. I'm staying out." It was only 3 days. I didn't want to stay any longer. There were many hotels outside, but I didn't dare spend too much money. So I found a cheap one and booked it for 3 days. After putting down my bag, I suddenly remembered that my newspaper was still in the original room. It had the address of the report. I rushed back anxiously, only to find the newspaper I had carefully placed in the drawer was gone. After searching, I saw Leela holding it and tearing it into strips. "Stop tearing it," I shouted and rushed to grab it from her. Leela froze, then lunged to snatch it back, shouting, "Bad guy. Give me back my strips. You're a big bad guy, get out of my house." Afraid she would tear it further, I pushed her aside. Leela fell to the ground. Wendy seemed to hear the commotion and quickly came over, picking up the wailing child from the floor. "Why are you bullying Leela?" My chest heaved with anger as I held up the torn newspaper. "What am I doing? Look at what your precious daughter did. She tore the homeowner's things to shreds. And you still have the nerve to stay here? Get out of my house." Wendy's face turned pale with anger, and she looked at me coldly. "Don't think you'll always be the mistress of this house. Even if you are, you're no match for me." With Kevin not around, she didn't bother to pretend anymore. "You're not as good looking as me. Don't have my figure. And don't have my status. Why do you get to keep such a good man like Kevin?" She scoffed and carried the child into the room. My fingers turned white from gripping the newspaper. Wendy's words made my chest tighten, but soon let out a wild sigh. I let it go. It was true that I wasn't as good looking as her or as successful in various aspects. But I had one advantage, at least I didn't rely on men and could support myself with my own hands. She, Kevin Ifoot, on the other hand, was like a daughter plant, only able to parasitize on men. In this regard, I looked down on her. Carefully folding the newspaper and putting it in my pocket, I also stuffed the living room calendar into my backpack. Carrying the bag, I returned to the cheap hotel I had booked, thinking about my miserable past life. When I first was reborn, I had wanted to make a scene with Kevin. At least to ruin his reputation and make Wendy ashamed. But Kevin was a high-achieving student. If he lost his job here, he could easily start over elsewhere. Wendy, since she was with him, wouldn't be greatly affected either. It was more practical to shake off these people and live my own life than to waste energy on such matters. Wasting precious time and energy on these obstacles in life was simply not worth it. With that in mind, I shook my head and cast all these thoughts aside. However, I still didn't expect Kevin to find my hotel. I was sound asleep in the hotel when a gentle knock on the door woke me. Thinking it was the hotel staff asking about checkout, I rubbed my eyes and climbed out of bed to open the door. To my surprise, Kevin stood outside. His hair was disheveled, as if he had walked a long way. His usually neat suit was wrinkled, and anxiety was evident in his expression. When he saw me, that anxiety turned to delight. "I finally found you." He sighed in relief. "I was worried something might happen to you out here alone." With that, he pushed past the door and squeezed inside. I wasn't strong enough to block him, so I stepped aside and watched him. "You've been out for a day, shouldn't you have calmed down by now? Come back with me." He started packing my things without hesitation. I stepped forward to grab his arm. He stopped and looked up at me, his voice uncharacteristically gentle. "What's wrong? Still angry? Wendy told me about the unpleasantness yesterday because Leela wore your things. Wendy feels very guilty. She kept saying she didn't discipline her child well and made you angry. She insisted on coming to find you with me." She and I visited over a dozen hotels and guest houses. Her ankles were blistered from walking, so I made her go back to wait for news. Otherwise, she said she wouldn't rest until we found you. For the sake of how worried we both are. Be good. Stop being angry. And come home with me. I stared at him silently. Me, losing my temper? As if I were the unreasonable one. Noticing my demeanor, Kevin tried to clasp my hand by flipping his wrist, but I quickly pulled away. He looked at me in confusion. I smiled, recalling the way he had looked at me like a monster in my past life. I won't go back with you because I don't want to disrupt your happy little family of 3. Kevin's face visibly changed. What family of 3? What are you talking about? You're the one I'm engaged to. My fiancée. Wendy and Leela are just outsiders. I smiled faintly. My gaze icy. But your Wendy didn't say that to me. She said the mistress of your house might not be me. And even if it is, I'm no match for her. She also said I'm not as good looking, not as fit, and not as well off as her. So I shouldn't cling to a good man like you. Even Leela told me to get out of your house. My smile grew brighter. Tell me, should I go back? Kevin looked astonished, his brows furrowing. How is that possible? It's not like that between me and them. Don't overthink it. My tone was cold and provocative. You say it's not like that. But every one of your actions sends a clear message. You've always had impure intentions toward your old classmate. But you hide behind the pretext of caring for an old friend. Too afraid to admit your dirty thoughts. The corner of my lip curled into a mocking smile as I mercilessly tore off his mask of hypocrisy. Kevin's eyes flickered violently. And he couldn't help but tremble. I watched his expression stiffen, his eyes slowly lifting, even the muscles in his cheeks twitching faintly. After a long moment, he managed to speak. Don't talk nonsense. That's not true. If you don't want to go back, stay out for a few days to clear your mind. So you stop imagining things. When you're ready to come back, call me, and I'll pick you up. He stumbled backward. From start to finish, I never considered marrying anyone else. I watched expressionlessly as his back disappeared behind the door, then stepped forward to close it. So he doesn't plan to marry Wendy. Just play at being ambiguous? Wanting both a good reputation and a woman having it all. But where in the world is there such a perfect deal? I walked to the table where my calendar lay and tore off another page. Flipping to the page marked with a bold triangle, only a thin sheet remained before it. The corner of my lip twitched into a small smile. Soon, went out a low sigh. I would be free. The next day, I visited the wholesale market and bought some new daily necessities. My father called to say he had spoken to an old comrade in the city where I was going, asking him to keep an eye on me. He said I could turn to this comrade for help if I needed anything. After my father finished, my mother grabbed the phone, repeatedly urging me to stay safe and remember to call every day to report I was okay. I agreed, feeling a warmth in my eyes. They were getting older. Yet instead of scolding me for refusing to marry Kevin, they showed such meticulous concern. Such parents were the backbone that gave me the courage to overcome any difficulty. That night, I washed up early and lay down, my mind replaying the fate of my past life. I wondered, now that I had altered my life's trajectory, what would become of Kevin and Wendy? Would Wendy, as she had claimed, become the mistress of Kevin's house? With sighs for my past life and longing and excitement for the new one, I tossed and turned for a long time before finally drifting off to sleep. The next day, I dragged my packed luggage, hailed a taxi, and headed straight for the train station. The green train carried me and my dreams southward. It was a day and night later when I stepped onto the soil of the southern city. I found a hotel to drop off my luggage, then went to the company to report for duty. The induction was smooth, and the following work was intense and busy but fulfilling. In my past life, I had given up this rare job opportunity. In this life, I cherished it deeply, working hard and earnestly. I heard news of Kevin again a month later, when my mother called. Did you know Kevin looked for you for a long time? He even came to your father and me to ask where you went. We didn't want to tell him at first, but the boy wouldn't leave, staying in the countryside and neglecting his work. Finally, having fulfilled my answer, Your father had to tell him. He refuses to break off the engagement, saying you're still his fiancée. He said Wendy and her daughter no longer live with him. If you're still upset about that, he promises never to see them again and only live with you. Before he left, he said if you don't come back, he'll come to South City to find you. I snorted. Work went smoothly, and my efforts were recognized by my superiors and colleagues. Meanwhile, to further my professional knowledge and keep learning, I took on a part-time job to pay for night school. Life was hectic but purposeful. Every time my mother called, she updated me on Kevin. In that small county, even the slightest rumor spread like wildfire. When Kevin couldn't wait for me, he planned to resign from his factory and go to South City. He had even written his resignation letter. But the day before submitting it, Wendy showed up at the factory, accusing Kevin of having an affair with her and producing surveillance footage of them entering a hotel together at night. She demanded the factory make him account for his actions. In reality, this was pressure for Kevin to marry her. The incident caused a huge stir in the county. As the only prestigious university graduate there, even county leaders were alarmed, personally summoning Kevin for a talk about maintaining public decency. Under pressure from all sides, Kevin finally married Wendy. My mother sighed with relief as she told me, "Sonny, your decision to break off the engagement was truly right. Your father and I are so glad you avoided this mess after marriage. You were lucky to see early on that Kevin wasn't worth relying on." Yes. In this life, I was lucky. Lucky to be reborn. Lucky to be reborn before marrying Kevin. Lucky to rewrite my tragic past life. Lucky to start a new life. Sometime later, my mother mentioned Kevin again in fragmented updates, her tone full of pity. I gradually learned what happened next. As in my past life, Kevin's parents became paralyzed after a serious illness, requiring constant care, someone to feed them, bathe them, and tend to their needs. Kevin had to go to work, so the duty fell to Wendy. But she couldn't stand the hardship, showed no patience, and even abused the elderly, complaining loudly about the dirt and exhaustion. She quit after just a few days. Rumor had it that Wendy's late ex-husband hadn't died from his illness, but from her abuse. She had driven him to his grave with her cruelty. After the parents' paralysis, Kevin and Wendy fought daily. Eventually, he had to care for his parents himself. Unable to work normally, the factory kept him on only for his educational background but paid him the minimum wage. The elderly couple told everyone, if we hadn't agreed to the engagement cancellation, our daughter-in-law would have been named. Wendy is worse than an animal. Due to their illnesses, Kevin's family became a famous poverty-stricken household in the county. Relying on government subsidies, eating vegetable sellers at the market lived better than them. Later, seeing Kevin stuck with two paralyzed parents and poor finances, Wendy demanded a divorce. After the divorce, relying on her looks, she hooked up with a married man. But the man's wife was fierce and vengeful. In a fit of rage, she poured sulfuric acid on Wendy's face and head. Wendy became both disfigured and disabled. Unable to accept her new reality, she committed suicide before being discharged from the hospital. Before dying, she killed her own daughter, then drove a sharp blade into her own heart, apparently not wanting to walk the path to the afterlife alone. The last I heard, Kevin had been taking care of the two elderly people and never remarried. My career developed better and better. From an ordinary employee, I worked my way up to become the vice president of the company. When the company expanded its business, I thought of the small northern town where I was born and recommended it to the boss. When I boarded the northbound train, I was no longer the woman who had carried luggage to work in the south, but a company representative going north to invest. As an investor, the county received me with great ceremony and even arranged a special TV interview. After the interview, accompanied by county leaders, I walked out of the TV station and saw a tall but slightly hunched figure in the distance. The county leader obviously recognized him and greeted him from afar. "Kevin, coming to deliver food to the elderly?" The man nodded to the county leader. "Yes. On time every day." When his gaze fell on me, he clearly froze. Seeing that he seemed to know me, the county leader introduced my identity. "This is Ms. Sonny, a representative of a star company, and the person in charge of the county's major investment promotion project. Do you know each other? The man stared at me blankly. After a long while, he nodded. I glanced in the direction he was walking and realized that the County People's Hospital had moved next to the TV station. No wonder I ran into Kevin here. He had changed a lot. Half his hair was white, and his once handsome face was now gaunt, aged, and wrinkled. With hunched shoulders, he looked haggard and exhausted, his eyes dull and lifeless, as if a flame had been extinguished. Suddenly, I remembered the words he had said in my past life. His lips trembled, and his voice was tense. "Can I talk to you for a moment?" After he delivered the food, we sat down in a nearby small restaurant. The restaurant was narrow and not crowded. A shabby small TV hung on the adjacent wall, playing a Hong Kong drama with blurry picture quality. I looked down and took a sip of tea, unsure of what he wanted to say. He stared at me in silence for a while. "I'm sorry." His voice was hoarse. "Everything you said to me before you left was true. I deceived myself, pretending to be a gentleman, but my thoughts were dirty. But after you left, I truly woke up." Wendy took the security footage to the factory to make a scene, demanding that I marry her. But Sonny, I really didn't have a relationship with her. She just tricked me into going to the hotel and deliberately left evidence. He smiled bitterly. But who would believe me? So I had no choice but to marry her. Later, his eyes reddened, and he laughed self-deprecating lie. Life became a mess. Rubbing his face, his slightly husky voice trembled. Not long after the wedding, Kevin still went to develop in a big coastal city in the south. His eyes shimmered with tiny fragments of light. I stared at him and said calmly, "There are no what-ifs in reality." Putting down the teacup, I stood up and left one last sentence before turning away. No matter when, one must always seek a glimmer of light to survive in the chaos. I heard the man choke up behind me. "Thank you, Sonny." Stepping out of the small restaurant and feeling the wind in my ears, I thought, "Sonny, you are truly lucky. You rewrote your destiny. You took control of your life. You lived a wonderful life of your own. Believe the future will be even better." Later, the company further expanded its business scope to overseas markets. My position was promoted again, and I became the person in charge of the overseas market. Concerned about my parents, I planned to take them with me. The procedures were quickly completed, and our family went abroad. The overseas company I managed developed smoothly. During my free time, I took my parents traveling everywhere. Since our family had left that small northern town, I never heard any news about Kevin again. Like intersecting lines that never meet again. The end.